Now this is Unit 2.2. We will be talking about the role of markets in allocating resources, and we will be talking about what do we mean by resource allocation, what is the definition of it. Okay, so how will we use our resources, our scarce resources, in the most efficient way possible? And also, I will introduce what we will be taking in Unit 2.3, which will be talking about demand and supply and knowing the graphs and the equilibrium and disequilibrium point. Okay, also we will learn three main questions regarding resource allocation, and it would be what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Also, we will define what price mechanism is and in what economic system this price mechanism is used. So our objective now would be analyze how resources are allocated in a market economy. Now, before we start, I would like you to open your books to page 38 and read the activity, which is 2.1, and it's about tropical trouble. And then you answer these three questions. Okay, so you pause the video, you solve that, and then we will go back to these three important economic questions. The first one, it's called what to produce. So I'm asking, when it comes to resource allocation, I will be asking myself, what goods and services shall I produce? Mainly, it should be goods and services that satisfy people's needs and wants. Because guys, if I have a company and I want to sell goods and services, I wouldn't want to produce anything that does not interest the people, which means they will not buy my product. So usually I would care about people's satisfaction. This is if I'm talking about a private sector and it's my own business. Whereas, for example, in Unit 1, when we were explaining the opportunity cost, remember, we were talking about the government having a piece of land, and land is a scarce resource, and the government needed to choose what to make with this piece of land. Should they build a highway, or should they use a farmland? Now, according to what the people demanded, let's say they demanded a highway, so the government would do the first choice, and this second choice would be the opportunity cost, since the government did not choose. So what goods and services to produce? This is what the government did. It did the highway because this is mainly what the people wanted. Now, for example, here also regarding the UAE government, they have a budget. Now, how should they spend this budget? How should they use these resources? Should they use it in order to make the national defense in the country better, or provide better services for the retired people? Okay? How to produce? When I ask myself this question, it means I will choose something called the cheapest method of production. Is it cheaper for us to produce, for example, using labor, or is it cheaper to use capital instead of labor? Whatever is cheaper, then this is what the government, or I myself, if I was a private business, would decide. So I am deciding how to use my resources in the best efficient way. And in order to do that, as we said, I'm asking myself these three questions. What to produce, which was explained previously. The second question is how to produce, and it means using the cheapest method of production. The third question would be for whom to produce. For whom to produce, you guys? It should be for people who are willing and able to buy the goods and services. I don't care about only willing to produce goods, to buy the goods and services. They should also be capable of affording that particular good or service. Because remember, if I am a private business, I would never want to produce anything that will not lead to profit at the end. Whereas if it was for the government, no, they wouldn't mind, because governments, as we said, they do not care about making profits. So I would give you an example about a private company. For example, Ferrari. The Ferrari company, they wouldn't care about me as a consumer, because, okay, I am willing to buy a Ferrari, but unfortunately, I am not able to pay for a Ferrari, so obviously I'm not the targeted customers. So the targeted customers for this company would be people who can afford, so mainly the rich people. Here, for example, if I'm talking about the flu vaccine or the coronavirus vaccine, who would these vaccines be provided from? From who would they be provided? They would be provided to us by the government. Okay, so if we have a limited supply, the government mainly, who would they provide the vaccines first? To the people who are most vulnerable. For example, the old people, since their immunity system is not strong enough. Okay, who should benefit from the construction of a new school if it was a public school? Who would be the one benefiting? The less fortunate in the country. So particularly the poor people who cannot afford going to private schools. Now, also, if you want, you can also pause the video and solve page 39. You have activity 2.2. Now, but before you start solving, and automatically when I see these three questions, I would consider this resource allocation. Now, there is a resource allocation problem, and it is to decide how to best distribute or allocate or use our limited resources in different productive uses. In order to answer that question, or in order to solve that particular problem, I would need to ask myself these three questions and abide by them, and we already explained them before. Okay? Now, I would like you to think about what are the three types of economy that we have, and try please to look up what is a market economy, what is a command economy, and what is the difference between a market and a command economy, and which economic system do you think it's the most efficient and why. So mainly in your externals, that would be considered as a discuss question. So how do we solve the problem of resource allocation? It is by choosing the best economic system. What is an economic system? It is who in an economy decide what goods and services to produce and how to produce them, and how are these decisions made. So who answers these three questions? If these three questions are answered by the private sector, then it would be a market economy or a free market economy. They mean the same thing. If these three questions, the what, how, and for whom to produce, were answered by the government, which is the public sector, then it means I'm talking about a planned or a command economy. They mean the same thing. Now, later on, when we continue with the lesson, we will learn specifically the advantages and disadvantages of each of these three economic systems. Okay, now this one has disadvantages, and this economic system also has disadvantages. So they figured out that the best and the most efficient economic system would be a mixed economy. Who answers these three questions would be both the private and the public sector. So a mixed economic system would be a combination of private plus public sectors. Okay? Now, when I'm talking about the market economy, we will explain later on something called price mechanism. Okay? We will explain it at the end of this video. Now, when I'm talking about the market economic system, as we said, we're talking about private sectors only. Only. So there will be no government intervention. Now remember, if there is zero government intervention, guys, this does not exist really in the real world. This is only applicable in books, so theories. Okay, so later on you will see a scale of government intervention from 0 to 100%. But mainly here, when I'm talking about a market economic system or a free market economic system, it means the businesses are owned by the private sector. So here, the private sector is the one producing the goods and services, and they are giving it to the, not giving it, selling it to the consumers. And in return, what are the consumers doing when they buy it? They are giving money to the producers. So we have two transactions, the buying and the selling. Remember, we took this in Unit 1. When we are talking about buying and selling of goods and services, this means we're talking about something called exchange or trade of goods and services. Now let's see what the definition of a free market economic system is. In a free market economic system, all decisions are taken by the private sector. Okay, so these three questions are answered by the private sector. And there is little or no government intervention, or government also, it's the public sector, okay? So since there is no government intervention, you guys, when I'm talking about a market economic system, it means there will be no tax charged on the people, and also the government, because there is no government intervention, the government will not spend on building, for example, public schools or providing police, army, which is safety to the country, because there is no government intervention. So this is one of the disadvantages that we will explain later on. So market economies are the most free economies because the people have the most say, and people can own and operate their own businesses and their own property. It is based on supply and demand, and this is where I will be talking about the price mechanism. Supply, what is it? Is the amount of a good or service produced, and demand is based on the desire for that good or service, so the buying of the good and services. Examples about countries that are market economies, it's the USA, Canada, Australia, United Kingdom, and Germany. Command economies or planned economies, it means I'm talking about the public sector. So the government is the one making all the decisions. And an example would be Cuba, the former Soviet Union countries, and also I can add North Korea. Citizens in a command economy, they cannot own their own private businesses because all the businesses will be owned by the government. So one of the disadvantages would be that there will be no competition since everything is owned by one owner. Mixed economies, as we said, it is a combination of both public sector and private sector intervention. So here you have this on page 40 in your book. It shows you from 0%, which is less government involvement, and until 100% government involvement, which means we're talking about planned economies. A great example would be North Korea. So 100% government involvement. China and Cuba, let's say it is 70% government involvement, but it would yield more to a planned economy and not a mixed economy. A mixed economy, these are examples of mixed economic countries, and the UAE is considered to be a mixed economy since there is government intervention and also you can own your business. So let's say a 50% public sector and 50% private sector. Market economy, these are examples of market economies, but as you can see, for example, the Bahamas and Singapore have less government intervention than that of Argentina, Nepal, and so on. So as you can see, this is a summary. When I'm talking about a command economy, it is mainly government control because they are the one choosing the answers of these three questions. Whereas when I'm talking about a free market economy, it is the consumer choosing the answers of the three questions. So this is what we call consumer sovereignty. Have a look at this. So we have the basic economic problem, and then it would lead to a resource allocation, which is using our resources in the best or most efficient way to produce goods and services. And in order to do that, we will ask ourselves these three questions. And if these three questions were answered by the private sector, then it would be a market economy. If it was answered by both private and public sector, it would be a mixed economy. If it was answered only by the government, it would be a planned or command economy. And this is a little activity for you can draw this Venn diagram on your copybook and include the notes that we just mentioned. Okay? And this is a summary as well, so have a look at it. We already explained it. And this, if you want and you have time, try to answer this extension activity. Now we are starting 2.2.2, which is the market system only, okay? And as we said when we were talking about the market system, remember before I told you I will be explaining price mechanism. So these are the objectives. Distinguish between market equilibrium and market disequilibrium. So what do these terms mean? And we need to explain the three economic questions again, which were what, how, and for whom to produce goods and services. And then we will talk about or analyze the role of price mechanism in a market system. What is a market system? Sorry, what is a market or an economy? So if you are asked to define a market or an economy, you would say it's a place where goods and services are being exchanged or traded or sold and bought. Okay, so exchange or trade, and you need to mention it's a place or an area. Now, the market or an economy could be on a local level, national level, or global. Global, it means I'm talking about exchange between different countries. So automatically, this would be international trade, where I would include exports and imports. Okay? And national, it's for all of the UAE, so it's within the country. Local, it could be the Abu Dhabi local market or the Dubai local market. So it's within a small community only. So if you want city also. I want you to define what an economy is, and directly you need 1 minute only, and tell me what are the three types of economies that we have. Let's see what the market outcomes are. Who decides the price of the product? So what makes the phone, for example, 3,000 dirhams? Who decides the price of it? What do you think? Here, who decides? It's both demand and supply of a product. So the buying of a product and how much the producers are producing of that particular product. This is what determines the price. When the demand is equal to the supply, this is what we call equilibrium. When the demand is greater or less than the supply, then this would be called disequilibrium. So when people are demanding more or less than what is available. So graphically, I don't need you to worry about it now because we will be taking this in details in Unit 2.3. Graphically, we always put the price on the y-axis and the quantity on the x-axis. The supply curve mainly is always upward sloping, and we'll explain why it looks like that later on. And the demand is like that. But what you need to know is the point of intersection between the supply curve and the demand curve. It's that purple point here, and this would be my equilibrium point, which is at quantity 60. So quantity supplied is equal to quantity demanded, which is equal to 60 units of whatever the product is. And the market price, which is the equilibrium point also, it would be at $3. Okay? Any point above the equilibrium, so any point here, we will call it disequilibrium, and specifically it would be a surplus where the supply is greater than my demand. And any point here, which is below the equilibrium point, also it is disequilibrium, but I would consider it a shortage since people are demanding more than what is available. So the demand is greater than the supply. Okay, we already said that. What's a surplus and what's a shortage? Now I will be explaining price mechanism and how does it work. Remember, this is the photo that we saw before. So we were talking about the producer selling the goods and services to the people, and on the other hand, these consumers are buying the goods and services. Now, why are they buying it? Because it gives them satisfaction. And why are private firms producing goods and services? Because they care about maximizing their profits. Now, if another firm wants to open and compete with that firm, it means they started their business because they know that this firm is making profits. So what is price mechanism? Price mechanism is a signal that tells firm what is profitable for them to produce. And now also, this is a small activity. I would like you to think about all the economies in the world, and do you think they are the same? Why or why not? So do you think all the economies in the world are command economies, or are they mixed economies? I need you to explain your answer. And what is the difference, quickly as a summary, between public and private sector, which was already explained before. Okay, so guys, by the end of this lesson, uh, you should be able to know the three basic economic questions and to compare and contrast a command economy with a free market system. Also, students should have a basic understanding of the free enterprise system under which producers and consumers make major economic decisions. Thank you guys, and I hope you understood the lesson. Any questions that you have, please don't forget to send me a message on Edmodo, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you, and have a nice day. I would like you to solve this one, and that would be good. So I need you to pick 4 words that are the hardest to understand and complete the squares to help you understand them. Okay, 4 words that you thought they were absolutely difficult. Not absolutely difficult, like you didn't like them a lot. So let's say price mechanism, you don't really like that word, you didn't really understand it. I want you to write it here, write its definition. I need you to use it in a sentence and try to draw a small picture of it. And this is the end of the lesson, okay? So make sure you write something called 2 stars and a wish. There's 2 stars would be 2 things that you mastered during that lesson, so you absolutely know them. And 1 thing that you would like us to explain next time or discuss next time we have a class. Thank you, guys.